Welcome back to part 2. The net surrounding the imperial throne has finally closed, and the final moves of this conspiracy are about to play out. If you aren't ready for how Paul Atreides' reign ends, consider this your final spoiler warning. The threats have already breached the inner sanctum. The Ghola Hate, played by Jason Momoa, wanders the palace as a dormant weapon, while Princess Irulan, played by Florence Pugh, has secretly administered the contraceptives that have turned Chani's pregnancy into a life-threatening crisis. Paul sees every single detail of this conspiracy unfolding in his mind, but his absolute foresight provides no escape. It has become a track he cannot leave, turning his position of total authority into a prison of his own making. The conspiracy strikes when Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, is lured into the narrow slums of Arrakis to meet a supposed Atreides loyalist cell. It is an ambush. The conspirators detonate a forbidden atomic weapon called a stone burner. Instantly, the device releases a localized wave of intense radiation that completely destroys the soft tissue of Paul's eyes. In the aftermath, the crowd expects a broken man. By Fremen law, a blinded warrior is a liability and must be left to die. But Paul stands up and walks out of the ruins with perfect, effortless precision. His physical eyes are gone, but his prescience has become absolute. He perceives every grain of sand and every shifting shadow in real time. He walks within his prophetic vision of the present, operating with a certainty that terrifies his enemies. This godlike perception does nothing to help the reality in the deep desert. There, Chani, played by Zendaya, is enduring an agonizing, accelerated labor that is rapidly draining her life force. Paul bears the burden of a man who can see the movements of the stars, but remains powerless to save the one life that gives his world meaning. Within the siege, the absolute certainty of Paul's vision finally cracks. He had only ever foreseen a single daughter. Instead, Chani delivers twins, a son, Leto II, and a girl named Ghanima. The physical strain of the birth proves too great. Chani dies in Paul's arms, leaving him in a world his visions no longer reflect. This psychological shock is the trigger the conspirators were waiting for. It activates the assassination programming hidden inside Hate, played by Jason Momoa. He draws his weapon, compelled by his conditioning to strike down his duke. But the blade never falls. The conflict between the Ghola's orders and the man's loyalty shatters the conditioning entirely. In a moment of trauma, the soul and memories of the original Duncan Idaho break through, and he moves to protect Paul instead of killing him. The Toile Laxu spent years engineering Hate's loyalty, but they couldn't account for a spirit that remembered its own history. The friend Paul lost on Arrakis has finally returned. Even with Duncan's return, the threat is immediate. The face dancer Scytale, played by Robert Pattinson, corners the Emperor, holding a blade inches from the newborn twins. Scytale offers a final bargain: surrender the throne and the spice monopoly, and the Tleilaxu will use their genetic tanks to clone Chani and return her to Paul's side. Paul refuses to trade his empire for a hollow ghost. But as the moment intensifies, his prescient vision finally goes dark. The presence of the twins has created a blind spot he cannot see through. In that darkness, Paul finds a new way to see. His infant son, Leto II, was born with his ancestral memories already awake. He telepathically links with his father, sharing his own perspective. Seeing the room through the eyes of his newborn son, Paul hurls a Christ knife across the chamber. It strikes Scytale in the throat, ending the threat to the Atreides line. Paul survives this encounter by letting go of his divinity and trusting in the strength of his family. The conspiracy is crushed, but Paul's prophetic sight is gone for good. He is left with the reality of his condition. He is genuinely, permanently blind. He could continue to rule through the fear his name inspires, but he chooses instead to walk away from the religion built in his honor. Paul abdicates the throne, leaving his sister Alia, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, to rule as imperial regent. She is left to protect the twins, while Paul prepares for his final act. Honoring the Fremen tradition for the blind, Paul turns his back on his palace. He walks alone into the deep desert, offering his body to the sands of Arrakis. By following this ancient custom, Paul steps out from under the weight of his own legend. He trades his godhood for a quiet human end, ensuring that his life finishes as a man rather than a religious icon. This is the conclusion Frank Herbert intended, a story of a savior who has been dismantled by the very power and fanaticism he used to take the throne. This specific deconstruction of the Chosen One is why director Denis Villeneuve has called this chapter his favorite in the entire series. How do you feel about Paul's final walk into the sand? Let us know in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed this breakdown, and subscribe to be ready when Dune Part 3 arrives in theaters on December 18th, 2026.